Welcome to Standing on Business with Eric Foss. I'm your host, Eric Foss. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Standing on Business with Eric Foss. I'm your host, Eric Foss. All right, guys, today, like you see in the thumbnail, what we're going to get into is this has been being talked about for many years. There's been rumors about John Gotti getting beat up in prison and all this kind of stuff, and it was over a bet. It was over him saying the N-word. It was this. It had happened like this. So today, what we're going to do is I'm going to give you the real story. And what I'm going to do is, obviously I wasn't there, but I've always known part of the story. But I'm using something like when I watched John Jr.'s interview, I watched some of the things he said, and now I know how to clarify this and make my points and show you guys what really happened. The most logical explanation. So I'm going to break that all the way down for you guys today. Okay? So let's get started. Okay, first off, the incident happened in Marion. It was with a guy named Walter Johnson. Let's talk about Walter Johnson real quick. Now, here's what puzzles me a little bit about Johnson. Johnson is not from D.C., okay? Johnson is from Philadelphia, I believe. He's actually from Philadelphia. He was not doing a long prison sentence, okay? He's like doing like 10 years when this happened for a robbery. Now, here's the thing. Like I said, he's from Philly, but for some reason he's riding with a DC car. Philly has a big car. Why isn't he in the Philly car? Okay. I've always wondered this, and what John was talking about is starting to make sense to me. So I want to get into it. Okay, so right then and there, that's a red flag. Why aren't you in a car with your own people? So now, what I'm getting off that, there may have been some skeletons in the closet. Maybe he had done something in the Philly car. Maybe he was X'd out of the Philly car, anything like that. Or maybe there's a lot of DC dudes in the system, maybe he just rolled with DC. So, let's go. So now, basically what happened, for him to get to Marion, you would either have to be, because Marion was like ADX is now. Now, ADX is the most locked down facility in the country. It's for your biggest criminals. It's for your most influential criminals also. But it's also protective custody. A lot of people don't know that. Now, I don't know if Marion was designed the same way or if it was just all your worst inmates. Let's just say he's there because he's a bad inmate. So if you got 10 years and you wind up in ADX or Marion, you're a troublemaker. There's some issues. You have a lot of issues. Now, John Gotti is there because he's John Gotti. Now, some of the people that John messed with when he was there are legendary gang members. Black Bob, that's the Emmy guy or whatever, legend. I've never met him, but listen, I've heard of him. Also, some of them Aryan Brotherhood guys, because we're going to get into this Aryan Brotherhood situation. So now, the relationship with Gotti and them guys began like this. Everybody knows who John Gotti is. So when he came in, he got a lot of respect. Now, one thing that these common prison gangs and street gangs, they all want to take the next step in organized crime. Who's the top of the food chain? It's the mafia, the mob, Cosa Nostra, whatever you want to call it. That's what everybody looks at as the top of the food chain, and it is financially and all what was or whatever. So now, they are security threat groups, but they're designed with rules and constitutions and stuff like that. But the only part that they probably want to get into is the bigger money and the political stuff and the unions and stuff. So that's how they built their relationship with John Gotti. John Gotti was not teaching them, but he's just telling them the designs of how things work with them. It's just normal stuff. I mean, I've been in these situations too. I've talked to some of these guys, we talk about different ways of selling drugs, just things like that. So he formed a relationship with them. He was not getting extorted by no one. Let's get that straight. Now, the people that you did see say that he was getting extorted, and it did come up in the federal case. So people will use that as proof. But I just want to say something real quick. The prosecutors and also informants will want to use big names because prosecutors chase headlines and informants want to look like they gave really big information so they get better time cuts. So in other words, it could look like when them informants are saying, "Oh yeah, nobody cares about Teflon Don. We were extorting him." You got to remember, these guys are on sensitive needs yards. They're X'd out of these gangs. So this is not the real gang saying this. Okay, these are informants who may be trying to make themselves look a little bit better. But no, John Gotti was not getting extorted. No way, no how. So now, the incident, like I said, it's a lockdown facility. Even if it's not, but it is. So even if it's not, though, you got a guy in his late 20s, early 30s, works out probably all the time. He's a fighter, definitely fighting type of dude. You got a guy in his late 50s or whatever. Now, they cross paths. Now, I'm thinking somewhere that it happened would have had to been in between going into the rec cages. Because John Jr. was talking about when the cuffs were being on. That's when that's happening. So now, there could have been a way. Now, I'm not saying Gotti had his cuffs on either, because it wouldn't have made a difference. It wouldn't have made a difference because of the situation happened so fast. It could happen to anybody. So dude rolls up on Gotti, bang, 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 just piece him up. Now, I want to tell you something. As secure as this facility is, that did not last longer than 30 seconds. Okay? And fortunately, it didn't, because I don't care. It would have just been worse for John Gotti because you got stole. That can happen to anyone. Anybody can lose a fight, even if you square up or whatever. But, I mean, if somebody just walks up to you out of the blue and just start bang, 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 you're probably not going to come back from that. So, yeah, that's what happened. He got banged out like that. He got pieced up, yes. So now, gets broken up or whatever. Now, you got to understand something. Prison politics. Everybody wants to know what happened. So, John Jr. touched on the situation that Walter Johnson was having problems with the DC car and kind of wanted to get up out of there. What that could be perceived as, we call that, John didn't have the right terminology, we call that a gangster check-in. Okay? Now, here's the thing too. John Gotti is a big name. So now, when he does this, he knows he's leaving that prison. So now, apparently he was having some problems with DC car, like I said. So now, what he's going to do now, why would he pick John Gotti? Because he knows he's leaving out of there. He's going to have paperwork. John Gotti's a huge name, so now Walter's name's going to be ringing like he did something heroic. But remember the politics. You crossed lines. Why did you do that to this guy? What does Walter say? This might have been said not even there. This might have been said while he's being transferred and he's in Atlanta or somewhere. He might have told one of the little homies, yeah, he called me the N-word, so I had to do my, you know what I mean? And then that could have took off from there. Reason why I know that didn't happen. It didn't happen for John Gotti calling him the N-word. Trust me, it did not. Here's why. Junior touched on something. He said, John, he calls his father John, he said, John knew how to do time. John knew how to do time. And I agree with that. John Sr. was like me. And when I say like me, what I mean is this. I've been locked up as a juvenile. I've been to state prison. I've been to federal prison. I've been to a county jail. Listen, so John Gotti is the same. This wasn't John Gotti's first rodeo. John Gotti knew how to bid. Like I said, he had real people that he was friends with that set these structures and these politics. John Gotti is not bigger than the politics and the structure that is set. I'm sorry. Had John Gotti had called this man the N-word, the white guys would have tore the fur off of John Gotti. That's how that is done. So with that being said, John knows this. So he didn't do that. he already would know the trouble. Now, just to show you what type of person Walter Johnson is. So they get him up out of there. Now, look, there was hits on Walter Johnson. Sammy will go on here and say, oh, John put a bag on the guy's head and they beat John for no. There was hits on Walter Johnson for doing that to John Gotti, but there was hits because he crossed lines. So not just John Gotti and them mad at him. You have everybody mad at him. You got his own car mad at him. And there was already bad stuff coming out about him into that car. Now, let me tell you something. Walter Johnson was a tough guy. Very, very tough guy. Crazy, like I said. But let me tell you something about the DC car. There's way more badder people than Walter Johnson. And Walter Johnson knows that. So he knows he has to face repercussions. So he has to come up with an excuse. Because even if he winds up floating into an FCI, which he won't get unalived or nothing, them DC boys, they got hands. A lot of them could fight. And he could fight too, but I'm just saying they would hop on his ass. So that's why he has to come up with the reason why he did that to John Gotti, is the N-word thing. Okay? So, like I said, the guy Johnson, so there wasn't an actual hit on him, like paying money and all that kind of stuff, but everybody wanted a piece of his ass for what he did. And that's because of the political lines he crossed. Plus, like I said, a lot of the different cars, they respected John Gotti because, of who he was. And also, he talked to them people and he would teach them little certain things like that they didn't know, and they want, like I said, they want to move up in the prime, everybody wants that money. But so no, John wouldn't have had to put no money on his head. There's going to be people who just want to tear the fur off him. Well, anyway, that did not happen on that bid. He wound up skating out. Wherever he went, he skated out. So here's the deal with him. He gets home. I don't know how long he's home, but he wasn't home that long. He goes and he hops over this is down in D.C., this is down around my area. I'm from Baltimore. He hops one of them turnstiles in the train or whatever. And the cop comes up. It's a younger cop, probably 22 years old or something, with a family or whatever. And this shows you how crazy, strong and stuff this guy was. He actually takes the cop, throws him on the ground, beats on the cop, takes the cop's gun, and unalives the cop. Now, so he's got to fight this case. Now, he's over DC jail. It wasn't CTF. I'm pretty sure it wasn't CTF, but it could have been CTF. But it's a jail in DC, but I'm going to assume it was DC jail. So this shows you once again what type of person he is. Now, I don't think that the past stuff from his bid had caught up to him in DC jail. But this shows you what a troublemaker he is. He makes trouble for himself. The young boys in DC jail wind up hitting him up. I mean, they tore the fur off of Walter Johnson as he was fighting that case. Now, this has nothing to do with John Gotti incident. This has nothing to do with the DC car being after him on his last bid when he was in Marion or whatever. This is something new that happened. What I'm telling you is now, this works for what I'm saying logically. This guy was a serious troublemaker. So what happened, so basically the reason why I was able to explain this like this and why I'm backing this with facts is because I was missing parts of the story. I always knew, because Vito Guzzo told me, because he was at Marion, I always knew what happened during the physical altercation. I know he walked up on John, bop, 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 gunned him out. I've known that, okay? It's always been the reasoning. Now, Vito obviously never said, like, we talked about the rumor and where it said, no, that's not, because we know that you don't do that. John knew how to do time. He knows he can't do that. We cannot do that. Nobody does that. No race disrespects another race that way, like that, or else your own race is going to crush you. And that's a fact. So John would have never done that. So that wasn't in discussion, but Vito had said something about, he had heard, the other rumor about the gambling thing. So he didn't know if John, interrupted the guy with a ticket and all. So I kind of went along that theory. Or maybe John was running a ticket because he did have some money exchanges on the outside. But like I said, money exchanges on the outside could have been for anything. He might have been through one of the cadre guys to get him extra food, anything like that. Look, even though you're an ADX or Marion, there's ways to swindle things, So with that now, I'm going to dispel the betting thing. I'm not going to say now. I know John gambles, but it had nothing to do with that. He was a target because of his name that can impress other younger homies coming in, and it could actually make him build himself a little car in case he has to go against. It could be like an inter-family thing, which would never work because he's from Philadelphia and he's in the DC car, but you never know what's going through this guy's head. So that's why John was targeted, is because of his name, John Gotti. And then after it's all said and done, this guy has to answer for that. So what's he got to do? He's got to come up with the excuse of why he did it, so that you don't got to worry about his own car getting him. And he also had other problems arising out of his own car. But like I said, the guy couldn't even put all that behind him. He actually went home, would have skated through everything, but he's such a crazy bad dude. Like I said, everything points to he's just off his rocker. John didn't say the N-word, none of that kind of stuff. He was just a target because of his name. This guy's off his rocker. He has skeletons he's trying to get rid of. Now, once he comes to a little bit of senses, he has to come up with an excuse of why he did it. So it all plays together of what I'm breaking down to you with the politics, guys. So I think that clarifies things. And I was able to explain that and explain the type of person he was, because he did get hit up. 100% he got hit up. They tore the fur off him. I don't know how many times or whatever. It had nothing to do with the Gotti situation. Had nothing to do with the old situation of his car or nothing like that. But once again, it shows his character. So you're going to compare the characters. John Gotti, a man who's very respectable, respects himself, respects others. You know what I mean? We know John Gotti's aura. He knows how to do time. He's been getting locked up his whole life. John Gotti is this. Walter Johnson, we have just laid out the case. He's just a nutcase, everything he does. So I'm going to go with logical opinion. He just targeted Gotti for who he was, to get away from his skeletons. No, Gotti didn't lay no money on his head and get brought, none of that. Okay? There was different hits coming. Everybody was pissed. John Gotti Jr. did hit on something too. The Latin Kings, the Gotti's very close with the Latin Kings. Let me just put it that way. Junior is too. So he's not in them. So don't get into that. But I'm just talking about doing time and stuff like that, because their organization is kind of like a little bit like correlates with the mob, which all organizations do. But you know. So there was a lot of Latin Kings. There was a lot of, like I said, you had Black Bob. You had the whites. You had people, they rallied for John Gotti, especially when he got sick. You know, they went on hunger strikes and stuff like that. So no, nobody was doing nothing like that to John, like extorting him or anything like that. And a lot of them hits and people made at Walter Johnson is because they loved John Gotti, not because John Gotti laid out money and stuff. Sammy's a liar. Sammy wouldn't last on a real yard, on a penitentiary yard. He would last about as long as Whitey Bulger. So when Sammy tells you these stories, remember the yards that he's on. Okay? And remember the guys that he said co-signed him and didn't like Gotti. If they're on the same yard, that means they can't walk a real yard. There's something going on, you know. So, you know, look, I'm talking about, I walked real yards. John Gotti walked real yards. And incidents happen on real yards. Within all the years of Gotti doing time, I'm sure this wasn't his first dust up either. Okay? But like I said, he's done time. He knows how to do it. So all logical. I mean, over here in our community, we kind of like think. You know what I mean? We think like what is most likely. And, you know, we put facts behind it like I just did. So I don't think you got to go no further than here. That's the story. Makes the most sense. All right, guys, wrap this up right now. Remember, like, share, subscribe. Put everybody onto the channel, man. Things are going to blow up. I'm telling you, we're going to keep doing this. I got some awesome stuff I'm about to put out. I'm going to put out a little something. I'm going to put something out about Frankie DiPietro. Apparently, allegedly, now he's made in the Genovese family, but he was hanging out with Lucchese. But that was my dude. I'm going to tell you some stories about him. I love Frankie. He's the man. Let me tell you something. Frankie saved me like a year in prison, and I'll get into that. Okay, guys, until next time, remember, always stand on business.